Check this out, boys.
Take a look at the bags under my eyes.
This is an absolutely brutal week for me. Loads of late nights, loads of time spent in front of a computer. 2 Bellator events to get through. Obviously, we've got Bellator 215 starting in a few hours. Sergey Kharitonov and Matt Mitrione in the main event. Then tomorrow night, we've got Bellator 216, Paul Daly against Michael Venom Page. And then Sunday night, UFC on ESPN 1, Cain Velasquez versus Francis Ngannou. But I think I'm finally starting to get through the worst of it. I've only got 3 fights left to research on the UFC card on Sunday night. I'm going to be getting through 4 of those fights in today's video. So this video might be a little bit longer than the other 2 just because there's an extra fight thrown in. If you want to see my breakdowns for the other fights that I've done so far, I'll leave the links in the description to part 1 and part 2 of this video. And if I get 20 likes on every video that I do this week, I will be doing a bonus video tomorrow breaking down Bellator 216 from a betting perspective. So if you want me to do that video, please take some time to subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on this video as well as the first 2 parts to this video. But let's jump right in. The first fight that I want to talk about today is Luke Sanders against Renan Barao. So this is a results business, and unfortunately these 2 guys have fallen on hard times. If we take a look at Luke Sanders' record, he is 1-3 in his last 4 fights, which doesn't look good on paper. And Renan Barao is also struggling. Obviously, he's for a much higher level of opponent, but he's currently 1-5 in his last 6 fights. So both these guys need a win really badly. To some extent, with Renan Barao being on a 3-fight losing streak, most guys would have been cut by now, but obviously Renan Barao's were the greatest bantamweight champions of all time. He's a high-profile fighter, and this matchup here kind of feels like the UFC are trying to gift him a win. I feel they tried to gift him a win in his last fight against Andre Ewell. Andre Ewell was making his UFC debut. I believe he was making his UFC debut on short notice as well. So really that was a guy that Renan Barao should have been beaten, and he lost a split decision. And now Luke Sanders is obviously quite another generous matchup for a guy of Barao's level. So if we jump into this matchup, what I would say about Barao is that people are writing him off, and that's as simple as it gets. You can tell that by his odds. He certainly shouldn't be an underdog in this fight based on the skills that both guys bring to the table, because I do feel Renan Barao is significantly better everywhere. But obviously, you know, going 1-5 in your last 6 fights, even against a really good level of opponent, doesn't look good. And also the nature of his losses against Ewell, Kelleher and Sterling haven't looked great. Of course, he gassed out against Sterling, also faded against Kelleher, and also kind of faded in the fight against Ewell as well. But to me, even though there's no doubt that all those brutal weight cuts and USADA and all the wars that Barao's been in over the years, you know, he's had over 40 pro fights. There's no doubt that all those factors have taken their toll on his level of performance, but at the same time, to me, he just looks more like a fighter lacking in confidence than a fighter that's completely done. And what I mean by that is, if you go back and watch his fight against Aljamain Sterling, you'll see that he came out the gate extremely aggressively. He dominated Sterling for the first half of that fight, but just put way too much energy into pursuing a finish and just slowed down significantly, lost the second half of the fight and ultimately lost the decision. Similar story with Kelleher, although he did struggle a little bit more against Kelleher. Kelleher did a good job of stuffing his takedowns and landing some big shots. And then Andre Ewell, this matchup was a matchup where I feel bad for Barao, because he did come into this fight with an intelligent game plan, but he just didn't really have the confidence to execute it in the right way. So for me, it looks like Barao's doing all the right things. He's trying to move his career in the right direction. He's obviously made the huge commitment of moving from Nova União, the camp that he grew up in, over to American Top Team to try and get his career back on track. And for me, it looks to me like he's making adjustments every fight to get his career back on track. He's definitely moving in the right direction. You know, against Aljamain Sterling, he came out way too aggressive and gassed out and lost the fight. Similar story against Kelleher, although Kelleher I think it was just one of those nights where all the stars aligned for Kelleher. He looked outstanding in that matchup. And then in Barao's most recent fight against Andre Ewell, he did make good adjustments based on where he had lost the previous two fights. You know, he started a little bit slower. He tried to pace himself better in the second and third rounds, but ultimately he did start the first round quite strong, did use up quite a lot of energy taking Ewell down and controlling him on the ground. And then in the second and third round, he was reluctant to let his hands go for fear of gassing out. So he ended up making the mistake of being really passive, really tentative, and gave Ewell an opportunity to win rounds 2 and 3. But Barao, the point I'm trying to make is, in that Ewell fight, there were signs that Barao understands his weaknesses, and he's coming into fights with the game plan he needs to win, and he's also making adjustments. So really, whether Barao wins this fight or not is really in his hands. I mean, if we look at the odds, he is currently around about call it an average of, say, a 2.55 underdog. So if we pop that in here, that gives him an implied probability of 40% compared to Luke Sanders. If we take a look at Sanders' odds, call it an average of 1.57. Pop those in here. He's got an implied probability of about 64%. So with Sanders, there's no doubt that he's second best everywhere. Barao's a significantly better striker and a significantly better grappler. And when you look at Sanders' record, it is a little bit strange because of these finishes. You know, finished by Uri Alcantara in a fight that he was dominating. This fight with Andre Sukumtar was super competitive until he got caught in the second round, got caught cold. And dropped by Sukumtar, and then also got caught in a heel hook against Rani Yahya in the first round. Now, in isolation, these losses can happen to anyone. They're not particularly bad losses. There's no shame in getting submitted by a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner like Yahya. No shame in getting knocked out by a good technical striker like Sukumtar. And obviously, Alcantara is really dangerous. It's just, I'm not sure where these losses are coming from. If these types of losses are just bad luck, or is it down to complacency? Does Sanders, get complacent in fights? Does he get overly relaxed, or does he let his concentration slip? And that's the reason why he's getting caught in these submissions or knocked out. It's tough to say. But what I would say is Sanders is decent, but he doesn't have the skills to compete with Barao if Barao shows up and performs with the best of his ability. And Barao's skills are still there. He's not completely shot. It's not like these guys that have got loads of miles on the clock who's, they're... sorry, my dog's going crazy. Do apologise, guys. But it's not like Barao has got issues with his chin. He's still super durable, super tough. We saw him in the Kelleher fight, took a ton of damage and managed to hang in there. So... yes, his confidence seems to be shot, his pacing isn't great, and his cardio isn't what it used to be before USADA came into effect, but he still has the skills to win this fight. So, will he get his career back on track for this matchup? I'm not sure, to be honest with you, because like I say, he is lacking in confidence, but at these odds, guys, odds are around 2.55, 39% probability, significantly better than Sanders everywhere. We know Sanders has got Sanders has got a tendency to get caught standing and on the ground, and Barao, obviously very dangerous in all positions. He's a very strong grappler, very dangerous striker. I think there's value there. Barao's not really the kind of guy that I like to bet on. I like to bet on guys who are on an upward trajectory in their career, and Barao's clearly on a downward trajectory in his career. But an implied probability of 39% on a guy that is significantly better than their opponent everywhere, and on a guy that is trying to make improvements and showing signs that they are taking big steps to get their career back on track. I do think there's value there. Yes, Barao hasn't looked great in his last 3 fights, but at the same time, every time we see him, he seems to be making slight changes to put himself in a stronger position of picking up a win. So that's how I feel about that fight, guys. That one is done. Research yourself, go back, watch some of their fights, but I think you might find some value on Barao. I don't think he's a terrible bet at the current odds. So then the next fight, we are moving on. We're going to talk about, let's just close these down. We are going to talk about James Vick against Paul Felder. So straight off the bat, I want to talk about how much James Vick's odds have declined in the last 24 hours and also over the last week. So if we just refresh, and take a look at the odds here, you can see that at the beginning of the week, which would be Monday the 11th, there we go, James Vick was around about even money at odds of 2.06. But since then, his odds have declined significantly, down to an average of about, call it, say an average of 1.83, which is quite a significant drop. So I researched this fight yesterday, and I can see exactly why the odds have declined so much, because even at these odds, if we pop it into the implied probability calculator, even at these odds, that's an implied probability of 55%, and I definitely think there's value there. I think James Vick is a bet that you should consider this weekend. Obviously, do your own research, go back and watch some of his fights, go back and watch some of Felder's fights, but there is definitely value there. I think one of the biggest factors to take into consideration in this matchup is the big size difference between both guys. If we take a look at James Vick, he stands 6'3" with a 76-inch reach, whereas Paul Felder's 5'11" with a 70-inch reach. And that 6-inch reach advantage is going to be really significant in this matchup, because Vick does a really good job at fighting long, staying on the outside and making it really difficult for his opponents to get into a range where they can hurt him. Now, if you go back and watch some of Paul Felder's past fights, you will notice that he does struggle to get inside on his opponents. His strength are his kicks, but his boxing is not the best, to be honest with you. If you go back and watch some of Felder's fights, you'll see that a lot of Felder's punches fall short. And obviously, if Felder's punches are falling short against guys of roughly the same size as him, when he goes up against someone like James Vick that has excellent footwork, excellent movement, and they know how to fight long, and they've got a 6-inch reach advantage, it's going to be extra difficult for a guy like Felder to get inside and land anything significant. Now, if you can get in on James Vick and land a clean, hard shot, obviously you can KO him. We've seen it happen in the past when Beneil Dariush trapped him against the cage, and obviously in his last fight, Justin Gaethje literally walked him down and death shotted him in the first round. But the difference is, Justin Gaethje just threw caution to the wind, walked Vick down, got super aggressive, trapped him with his back against the cage, caught him cold, flat-footed, and landed a bomb and KO'd him. And that was a vicious KO shot. That happened back in August. So Vick's had a good 6 months off, but those kind of knockouts can change a fighter's career forever. So even though I do think there's value on Vick, that knockout is a little bit of concern. That can change the brain forever. That can change a fighter's confidence forever. That can change their durability forever. So that's definitely something to think about. But at the same time, with an implied probability of 55%, taking the size difference into account, taking the technique difference into account, the technique advantage that Vick has got over Felder into account, even with those concerns about that vicious KO that Vick suffered, I still think there's a good amount of value there. If we evaluate Felder based on his losses over the years, earlier on in his career, he was losing because he tended to go into a defensive shell when he couldn't settle into a rhythm. What you'd find is, if Felder faced an opponent that refused to stand in front of him in an exchange, if he fought an opponent that was a bit more elusive, a bit more technical, he would really struggle to settle into a rhythm and find his range. So he would just go into quite a tentative defensive shell, follow his opponent around the octagon, but not really have much success, not really be able to close the distance or land too many strikes. Now, obviously, one of Paul Felder's biggest strengths is his leg kicks, and with James Vick having a long, lean, thin frame, leg kicks can work wonders against a fighter with the body type that Vick's got. But Felder's not particularly great at cutting the octagon off and getting his kicks off when he does cut the octagon off. And Vick's footwork and mobility is so good, I just think that Felder's even going to be able to struggle to land his leg kicks, which are one of the only things that he does have as an advantage over Vick going into this fight. Felder's kicks are better than Vick's kicks. I'm a poet and I don't even know it. Anyway, what I would also say is, where we've seen Vick be caught a few times in the past and had the kill shot landed on them, and Felder is obviously dangerous. Felder's dangerous strikes tend to be elbows, knees, and spinning attacks. And in order to land those kind of strikes with knockout impact, you have to either catch your opponent when they're coming in, or you have to be able to get inside into a clinch position in close proximity to be able to land their elbows and knees. And Felder's not particularly good at tying guys up, and like I say again, Vick's footwork and mobility will make it very difficult for Felder to tie him up and get into a range where he can land his knees and elbows. Also, with Felder's spinning attacks have some kind of telegraph. They have subtle signs that a fighter's just about to uncork a spinning attack. And with Vick being able to fight so long and having that reach advantage, and also being a counter striker that likes to stay on the outside, Felder's going to give away subtle clues that he's about to uncork a spinning attack, and there's way more distance with Vick because he fights so long to see those spinning attacks coming so that he can get out of the way of them or block them. So obviously Felder's knees, elbows and spin attacks are dangerous, but I don't think he's going to have that much success with them in this fight, if I'm honest with you. So aside from a flash KO, I do think Vick is worth a bet here, guys. I would consider him, like I say, at an implied probability of 55%. You know, I mean, I definitely cap him at least 60%, which means, you know, at these current odds, you're getting a 5% margin on the bookies, which is really good value. You know, and it's not crazy to cap him even higher than that based on the significant advantages that he has. So that is another fight ticked off the list, guys. Go do some of your own research. Go check out some of Vick's past fights, Felder's past fights. See if you agree with me, and if you do, leave a comment below. If you don't agree with me, leave a comment below too. Let me know what you think. So moving on to the next fight is Aljamain Sterling against Jimmie Rivera. Now, I don't want to spend too long on this fight because I'm conscious we're doing more fights than usual in this video, so this video could end up being pretty long. So the reason why I don't want to spend too much time on this video is because I think the odds are bang on accurate. And at the end of the day, no matter who you think is going to win this fight, there's just no point in trying to dig for value and find bets where there aren't any. And let me show you what I mean by that. So if we look at the odds on Jimmie Rivera, at the moment he's currently around about a 1.71 favorite. So if we pop those into the implied probability calculator, you can see that that gives us an implied probability of 58%. So we'll call it 60%, just to round it up. And then if we take a look at the odds on Aljamain Sterling, we can see that he's currently around about, call it an average of 2.20 odds, which give him an implied probability of 45%. So the way I look at this fight is that I do think Jimmie Rivera will win. But the problem I have is I give him roughly a 60% chance of winning. This is one of those fights where I'm like 60-40 in favour of Rivera. And with the current implied probability of 58%, there's just no value there for me. So I would say that that Rivera would be a bet if his odds continue to improve. They've been improving all week. If we take a look at the odds chart here, if we bring it up, you can see that at the beginning of the week, if we go to Monday the 11th, he was a 1.56 favourite, and since then his odds have improved significantly up to currently an average of 1.71. So they are showing that the odds are moving in the right direction. I think if Jimmie's odds continue to improve to possibly 1.80, that would give him an implied probability of 56%. Where I personally cap Rivera around a 60% chance of winning, that's where you're getting into the territory that Rivera would be worth a bet. So I would keep an eye on this over the next few days, guys. We know that the majority of bets on UFC events tends to be placed on fight day, and we see a massive amount of odds movement in the lead up to a fight, in the final few hours leading up to a fight. So if you start to see Rivera's odds start to continually improve over the next few days, and then they get up to 1.80, 1.81, I think he might be worth a bet. Nothing too big, nothing too crazy, because I do think Sterling can make this competitive. But at the moment, it's a pass for me. But keep an eye on Rivera's odds. And now that I've talked to you about you know, how I see the fight from an odds perspective, let me just talk to you a little bit about why I do favour Rivera in this matchup. So the one thing that makes me cautious about Rivera is the fact that he hasn't fought that many high-level grapplers or high-level wrestlers throughout his career. He has fought Uriah Faber way back in 2016, but obviously Faber at that stage of his career was kind of in the tail end of his career, and for the last few years leading up to 2016, Faber's offensive wrestling and takedowns hadn't really been that great or looked that impressive. So the fact that Rivera was able to shut Faber down back in 2016 doesn't tell us that much about where his takedown defense or ground game is at the moment. Also, another high-level grappler that he faced, Uri Alcantara, but again, Uri Alcantara has been on a significant decline over the last few years, and Alcantara was never the strongest offensive wrestler either. And then obviously Pedro Munoz is a super high-level grappler, but back then, you know, when Pedro Munoz was competing back in the UFC in 2015, he wasn't the strongest offensive wrestler. His wrestling's improved a lot over the last couple of years, but back then he couldn't really threaten with takedowns. So overall, we really don't know that much about where Jimmie Rivera's takedown defense and ground game is at the moment. We can assume it's great because, like I say, he has shut down Faber, Alcantara, and Munoz, but at the same time, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. So you should never assume, and if you are assuming, make sure there's enough value in the odds to make the assumption and the risk worth the reward. And at the moment, with Rivera being a favourite, I don't believe there is. I would also say that Rivera, even though he trains at a gym which is well known for having guys with amazing takedown defense, you know, Tiger Schulman guys tend to have excellent takedown defense, we have seen Rivera slow down in a couple of fights in the past. He slowed down quite significantly in the second half of his fight against Thomas Almeida. He also slowed down in the Pedro Munoz fight. So that's something for us to think about as well. If Aljamain Sterling is able to make him work hard to defend takedowns in the first round, if Sterling's able to get him down in the first round and make Rivera work, will Rivera gas out and slow down, which will make it easier for Sterling to get the fight to the ground in the second and third round? So that's something for us to think about. So what I would also say about Sterling is he's quite an awkward fighter. He can make guys look bad. There's no doubt about it that Jimmie Rivera has a significant advantage when it comes to striking. But even though Rivera does put pressure on his opponents and he likes to come forward, Rivera is really a counter striker in disguise, because even though Rivera comes forward and likes to control the center of the octagon, you won't see Rivera lead the striking exchanges. He just likes to control the distance and force his opponent into going first. So what you'll see is Rivera come forward, close the distance, apply lots of pressure, and just uncork loads of feints, making his opponent feel pressured into trying to back him up with strikes, and then he'll counter them. But with a fighter like Sterling, who has good footwork, likes to stay on the outside, very unorthodox, uses lots of movement, if he doesn't go first, Rivera won't really throw that many strikes. So it could lead to like an awkward, tentative, weird fight where not a lot happens because neither guy wants to be the one that leads. So while Rivera does have a significant advantage when it comes to striking, he needs the right dance partner to look good. And with how awkward Aljamain's striking is, I'm not sure that he's the right dance partner. This fight could end up looking really, really awkward, and some of the rounds could look visually close. Remember, you know, bad judging is a big problem in MMA, and Sterling can make a stand-up fight look very ugly, particularly against a counter-striker like Jimmie Rivera. And one of Rivera's problems in the past is he has struggled to put his stamp on rounds. So for me, I need a little bit more value in the odds to take a shot on him. I do like Rivera everywhere. I cap him at around about 60%, but at the current odds, it's a pass. So the final fight that I want to talk about on today's video is Andrea Lee against Ashlee Evans-Smith. So let me just close these down. A very lovely Andrea Lee there. 30 years old. I thought she was a lot younger than that for some reason. I think it's because she's been kind of marketed as a prospect, but it's obviously taken her a while to work her way into the UFC. But better late than never. What I would say about Andrea Lee, she's obviously the favourite going into this fight. There's quite a bit of hype behind her, and she's brilliant. She is brilliant, and she's total chaos, and she's super aggressive. But the problem is her chaotic style of fighting is both a strength and a weakness, because Andrea Lee doesn't understand that there are time limits on a fight. She doesn't understand there's time limits on a round. She doesn't understand the importance of winning rounds. She doesn't even care about pacing herself. Andrea Lee is literally trying to kill you from the very first second of the fight to the last. Every single shot she throws has got fight-ending intentions on it. She throws everything into every kick and every punch. And when she's on the ground, she does not care about position. All she's trying to do is rip an arm off or choke you unconscious. That is literally Andrea Lee in a nutshell. And the problem with that fighting style is, when you're that chaotic, it doesn't always lead you to make the smartest decisions in fights. Obviously, if a fight goes the distance, the fighter that wins 2 out of the 3 rounds is going to win. And because Lee is so focused on the finish, that often means that she gives up position or puts herself in bad positions, which can get her into a little bit of trouble. I'm going to show you what I mean by that in this fight from back in, let's take a look. This fight is from back in 2017 against Heather Bassett. Now, obviously, this fight was 2 years ago, so Andrea Lee is bound to have improved quite a bit since then. But at the same time, Andrea Lee was still showing these weaknesses in her more recent fights against Veronica Macedo in her UFC debut, against Jamie Thornton, and also against Liz Tracy, which were, more recent. So, yeah, I guess 2 years ago, Lee will have improved, but if you go back and watch her fight against Veronica Macedo from just 7 or 8 months ago, she's still chaos, absolute chaos. And let me show you what I mean by that. So, if we get into this, this is the start of the first round here. And as you can see, Andrea Lee takes control of the center of the cage, looking for the clinch. She's obviously got a base in Muay Thai, so very early on she's going to look for the clinch. But look how aggressive she is with these shots, guys. We just rewind just a couple seconds. Remember what I was saying a few moments ago, where every single shot she throws, she's got fight-ending intentions with it. Watch how much she commits to these strikes. Don't see many female fighters this aggressive, and this is one of the reasons why Lee's got so much hype behind her. She is super aggressive, and look how strong she is in the clinch here. Clearly very physically strong, and justifying the hype with the way she looks with her stand-up. Very, very, very aggressive, and that's pretty much the story of this entire first round. Total domination from Lee. She just backs her opponent up. Sorry, I forgot this girl's name. Heather Bassett backs her up for the whole of the round. Eventually gets a takedown and cruises to a dominant first round win. But then, so you think so far so good. Andrea Lee looking absolutely brilliant in round 1. Super aggressive striking and obviously a heavy top game. She looks great, absolutely great, and I'm not denying that. But then, if we go into round 2, you can start to see a few of the issues that I have with Lee. So she obviously has a big advantage standing. We saw at the beginning of the first round, her opponent, Heather Bassett, looked like a rabbit caught in the headlights, terrified of Lee, backing up, trapped against the cage, allowing Lee to tee off on her. But then at the beginning of the second round, even though Lee has got such a massive advantage when it comes to striking, she chooses to tie up with Bassett, and as you can see here, makes a critical mistake. So she's got double underhooks here secured around Bassett's body, which is going to put Lee into a really strong position to complete this takedown. She can go for a trip takedown here or a throw, and you can see here, she goes for the trip takedown. Notice how Lee gets her left leg behind, we go to here, her left leg here behind Bassett's leg to trip her, but watch what happens. She does it too close to the cage and winds up being reversed and ends up on the bottom. So this is the problem I have with Lee. She has huge advantages over the majority of opponents, but she always ends up in close fights because she's chaos. She gets the nice trip takedown here, but gets reversed and winds up on the bottom. And Ashlee Evans-Smith is a really strong wrestler with a heavy top game. She takes top position. It's not going to be easy to get her off. So we carry on in this fight. We have Bassett. Bassett gets a good couple minutes of top control before Lee eventually reverses position and gets back on top. So you think You know, Andrea Lee, dominant first round. She might have felt something on the ground, thought, you know, at the beginning of the second round, I'm going to try and finish this girl. I can feel her submissions there for me. I'm going to try and take her down and find a way to finish the fight in the second round. You think she'd be fighting much smarter after that mistake that she made? Because, you know, if Bassett was slightly heavier from top position, she could have cruised to the rest of the round in top position, won that round, and potentially be going into the third round with Lee having won first round in the bag and Bassett having the second round in the bag, and it being a 50-50 fight going into the third, all because of that one mistake that Lee made, going for that trip takedown too close against the cage and getting reversed. So you think after that Lee would have learned from her mistake and chosen to fight a little bit smarter. But as you can see, as we get to the end of the actually, what I actually do want to show you before I go ahead to the end of this round is just how physically strong and powerful Andrea Lee is, how dangerous she is in the flyweight division. Watch as Bassett stands up, how Andrea Lee absolutely manhandles her here, goes to the clinch and literally throws her around. Like, it's almost like Lee believes these girls have got no business being in the cage with her. Look at how she just walks her down, shows absolutely no respect for her striking at all, tosses her against the cage, and uncorks power strikes looking for the finish. So that is Andrea Lee, super aggressive, always going for the kill. But you think she would have learned from the mistake she made earlier on in the round. But as I can show you here, if we just go to this point in the fight, Andrea Lee landing vicious knees and elbows in the clinch, and at this point disengages and then gets a little bit aggressive, throws a stupid, I guess, axe kick, you could call that. Watch it, disengages from Bassett in a moment, throws a high risk, low reward axe kick that's never really going to do that much damage, and ends up on the bottom. You know, a strong wrestler could have jumped into top position there and possibly stolen the round with 40 seconds left to go if she was able to inflict significant damage from top position. You know, so many judges score fights in favour of the fighter that ended the round the strongest. You know, some judges love late takedowns and top control. Again, Andrea Lee playing with fire here. Just watch it one more time. Going for a crazy axe kick. There's no need to go for this axe kick, but because she goes for it, risks being caught on the bottom. She gets away with it, manages to take top position there, and that's probably because Bassett's taken so much damage and she's so tired that she doesn't have the energy anymore to capitalize on that mistake that Lee made. So that is basically Andrea Lee in a nutshell. Now, as you can see, she is chaos. And as the current betting favourite, I just can't bet money on a fighter like that until I see them fight a little bit smarter. If we take a look at her odds at the moment, she's currently around about, call it an average of 1.60, which would give her an implied probability of 63%. What I would say about Andrea Lee, though, is even though she's total chaos and her biggest strength, which is her aggression and desire to find a finish, even though that is a big strength, it's also a big weakness. But there are possible signs that Lee's making big steps in her career to try and fight a little bit smarter, because I checked her Instagram profile and here you can see that it now looks like she's training at the Gladiator MMA Academy with crazy Tim Crader, who's an absolute legend in MMA, a brilliant MMA trainer. Tim Crader was basically the guy that was Dustin Poirier's coach in the early stage of Poirier's career, when Poirier was, you know, I think only 21 years old, competing in WEC, and even back then at just 21 years old, he looked absolutely outstanding. Matt Schnell came up under the tutelage of Tim Crader as well, and Crader is one of those guys that I think he lives in a small, rural, isolated area of America. Not too sure exactly where it is. I think it's in Louisiana, although don't quote me. But because he's in quite a small rural area, I think the talent pool of fighters for him to work with is quite small. But Tim Crader is an absolute legit MMA coach. So the fact that Andrea Lee is going and training there is a very good sign, because if you look at any of Andrea Lee's fights, there's no doubt that she's legit. There's no doubt that she could be a top 5 flyweight. You know, vicious striking, nasty Brazilian jiu-jitsu, all the solid wrestling fundamentals that you need, but she just gets carried away and ends up making silly mistakes that will start to cost her fights as she starts to face a higher level of opposition. So that's a good sign, though. I like to see her training at a gym like Gladiator, and hopefully we see some big improvements from her against Ashlee Evans-Smith on Sunday night. So, with this fight in mind, knowing how chaotic Andrea Lee is and knowing how she has a tendency to get carried away and give up position, does that open the door for Ashlee Evans-Smith to be a potential bet? Because we know Smith's got a heavy top game. So if we take a look at the implied probability on her odds at 2.50, it's bang on 40%, which basically makes this a 60-40 fight, which is pretty much where I cap this fight, again, to be honest with you, because there's no doubt about it, Andrea Lee has a significant advantage standing up. You know, Ashlee Evans-Smith, even though she has made significant improvements to her striking, she isn't on Andrea Lee's level. She tends to get caught quite cold. She doesn't have the best striking defense, and Lee should be able to land really big shots on her. Now, I do give Ashlee Evans-Smith the advantage when it comes to wrestling. She's a much more intelligent grappler. She does favour position over submission, and she's got a heavy top game. But in terms of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Andrea Lee's way more dangerous and way more offensive on the ground. Also something to bear in mind, as we know, all MMA events from now on should be using the ABC rules of MMA judging, the new judging criteria which came in at the beginning of 2016. And that judging criteria is supposed to favour offense on the ground as opposed to control. So Ashlee Evans-Smith is not that offensive on the ground. She does have a heavy top game, but she doesn't tend to do that much damage from top position, and she also doesn't threaten with that many submissions. So if Andrea Lee is attacking with loads of submissions off her back, like we know she always does, then under the new scoring, even if Andrea Lee is on her back, if we've got good educated judges that are using the correct scoring criteria, you know, many of them aren't, but if we do have fair judges for this fight that are using the correct criteria, there is a window of opportunity for Andrea Lee to win this fight off her back because of how offensive she is with her submission attempts. So this is a 60-40 fight. I do think Andrea Lee is justified in being the favourite. I do, because she's got an advantage striking and she's much more offensive on the ground, and obviously under the new scoring that should favour her. But her chaotic style of fighting and tendency to give up really good positions makes her just too much of a risk for me at the current odds. So I recommend a pass on this fight, guys. And that is it. We are 4 fights down. We have covered 9 fights. No, we've covered 10 fights now. 4 in this video and 6 in the other 2 videos that I've done over the last couple of days. Please go check them out. I'll leave a link to them in the description. And remember, if I get 20 likes on every video that I put out this week, I will do a bonus video tomorrow breaking down Bellator 216 from a betting perspective. Please also subscribe to help the channel grow. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to watch this video, guys, and I'll see you guys soon.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.